quick question. Everyone on Earth knows the Titanic. The iceberg, the band playing while it sank, the women and children first, all of it. But did you know the Titanic had a sister ship built even bigger that also sank? And that almost nobody talks about it? Stick with me, because this story has an iceberg's worth of drama. Minus the iceberg, plus something way weirder. Let's set the scene. Back in the early 1900s, a British company called White Star Line wanted to dominate the ocean liner business. So they built not one, not two, but three massive sister ships. First came the Olympic, then came the Titanic, and the third, the biggest of them all, was originally going to be called the Gigantic. Yeah, Gigantic. That name alone should tell you everything about how confident these people were. Then, in April 1912, the Titanic hit an iceberg and sank, taking over 1,500 people down with it. And suddenly, calling your next giant ship Gigantic felt like tempting fate in the worst possible way. So they quietly renamed her. She became the Britannic. Here's where it gets interesting. The Britannic was still being built when the Titanic went down, which meant the builders got to do something the Titanic's engineers never had a chance to do. Fix the mistakes in real time. They made the hull double-layered around the engine rooms. They raised the walls between compartments so water couldn't spill over the top as easily. They redesigned the portholes to seal better. And this is the part that always gets me. They installed massive new lifeboat davits, the cranes that lower lifeboats into the water, each one strong enough to launch 6 lifeboats instead of just 1 or 2. In total, this ship could carry 48 lifeboats, enough space for 3,600 people, way more than she would ever actually need. This was White Star Line looking at the Titanic disaster and basically saying, never again. So the Britannic gets finished in 1914, ready to become the safest, most luxurious ship on the ocean. And then World War I breaks out, and she never gets to live that life at all. Instead of champagne and first-class dinners, the British government takes this brand new ship and turns her into a hospital. They paint her white from bow to stern, slap giant red crosses down her sides, and send her off to war, not to fight, but to save lives. Her job was to sail into the war zone near Gallipoli and the Dardanelles, load up wounded soldiers by the thousands, and get them back to safety. And for about a year, that's exactly what she did. 5 successful trips. Thousands of soldiers saved, nurses, doctors, and crew running a floating hospital in the middle of a war. Then came trip number 6. On November 12, 1916, the Britannic left port headed back toward the Mediterranean. Nothing about this trip seemed different from the last 5. Same route, same mission, same confidence. She passed through rough storms, got delayed a bit at Naples, but by November 21st, she was cruising at full speed through a narrow stretch of water called the Aegean Channel, near a Greek island, on her way to pick up more wounded soldiers. At 8:12 in the morning, everything changed in an instant. A massive explosion ripped through the front of the ship. We now know it was a naval mine, planted by a German submarine, but in that moment, all anyone on board knew was that their ship had just been hit hard. The whole vessel jolted off course. The bow shot up and slammed back down. Below deck, in the boiler rooms closest to the blast, water started pouring, and almost immediately. Within 2 minutes, one entire boiler room was already flooded and useless. Now here's the thing. Remember all those safety upgrades I told you about? The double hull, the raised walls between compartments? On paper, this ship should have survived this hit. She was built to stay afloat, even with 6 compartments completely flooded. This explosion should have been bad, but survivable. Except 2 things went wrong that nobody had planned for. First, one of the watertight doors between 2 flooding compartments failed to close properly, letting water spread further than it should have. Second, and this is the detail that makes historians want to pull their hair out, the nurses on board had opened a bunch of portholes earlier that morning to air out the sick wards, just to let some fresh air in for the patients. Totally reasonable thing to do on a normal day. Except this wasn't a normal day anymore. And as the ship started tilting forward and down, those open portholes dipped below the waterline and started swallowing ocean water directly into decks that were supposed to stay dry. All those brilliant safety upgrades, undone by a door that didn't seal and some windows that got left open. The captain, a guy named Charles Bartlett, made a call that honestly made a lot of sense at the time. Instead of stopping the ship, he decided to try and beach her, basically drive the sinking Britannic straight toward the nearby island of Kea and run her aground before she went under completely. If it worked, everyone on board could just walk off onto dry land. Smart plan, except it required keeping the engines running and the ship moving at speed, and that decision is about to collide with something absolutely horrifying. While the captain is trying to save the ship, panic starts spreading on deck. Some crew members, without waiting for the official order, start lowering lifeboats into the water on their own. Remember, the ship is still moving forward at speed, engines running, propellers spinning. 2 lifeboats hit the water while the Britannic is still cutting through the ocean like nothing's wrong. And then, because the ship's bow was sinking while the stern was lifting up, those massive spinning propellers came partially out of the water, right where those 2 lifeboats were floating. I want you to actually picture this for a second. 2 lifeboats packed with people who thought they'd just escaped a sinking ship, drifting backward, straight into 2 enormous propellers the size of houses, still spinning at full speed. Survivors who watched it happen described people jumping out of the boats in pure terror, throwing themselves into the ocean rather than face what was coming. One nurse later said it looked like the propellers were mincing everything near them, boats, people, all of it, into one horrifying blur. A man named George Pearman, one of the young Sea Scouts on board, grabbed a hanging cable at the very last second and hauled himself out of the water just before those blades reached him. It gets even more insane. A 3rd lifeboat was drifting toward the same propellers, seconds away from the same fate, when word of what had just happened finally reached the bridge. Captain Bartlett immediately ordered the engines stopped. The propellers slowed and stopped spinning literally seconds before that 3rd boat would have been shredded too. The people in that boat pushed themselves off the blades with their bare hands and got clear. Once the ship stopped moving, things actually calmed down. From 8:35 onward, the crew launched the rest of the lifeboats properly, in order, without the ship dragging them toward danger. For a while, it even looked like the sinking had slowed down enough that the ship might survive after all. Bartlett, hopeful, restarted the engines to make one more attempt at beaching her on Kea. Bad idea. The moment the ship started moving again, water came rushing in even faster than before, now reaching all the way up to Deck D. At 9 a.m., less than an hour after the explosion, Bartlett accepted the truth. The Britannic was not going to make it to land. He gave the final order to abandon ship, sounded the whistle twice, and at 9:07 a.m., the largest ship lost in the entire First World War slipped beneath the waves of the Aegean Sea. 55 minutes. That's all it took. Faster than the Titanic. Faster than almost anyone expected for a ship this size, this well-built, this heavily reinforced. Here's the twist that makes this whole story worth telling. Despite everything going wrong, despite the mine, the failed watertight door, the open portholes, and the horror of those propellers, only 30 people died out of 1,066 on board. Compare that to the Titanic, where over 1,500 people lost their lives. The Britannic sank faster, got hit by an actual explosion instead of slow iceberg tear, and still, the overwhelming majority of everyone on board walked away alive. Almost all of those 30 deaths came from that one horrifying moment with the propellers. Take that away, and this disaster barely makes the history books at all. That is genuinely the whole story in one sentence. The lessons learned from Titanic's disaster worked. They just could not save everyone from a brand new kind of chaos nobody had planned for. So why does basically nobody know this story? Simple. The Titanic sank in peacetime, on her very first voyage, packed with celebrities, millionaires, and a doomed love story practically built into the tragedy itself. It became a myth, then a movie, then basically a religion. The Britannic sank during a brutal world war, doing quiet, unglamorous work, ferrying wounded soldiers back and forth. Nobody was throwing champagne parties on her decks. There was no orchestra playing as she went down. Just doctors, nurses, and crew doing their job until the day the job nearly killed them too. The wreck of the Britannic still sits on the ocean floor near Kia today, and it is actually in far better condition than the Titanic because it rests in much shallower, warmer water. Divers can and do visit her. Meanwhile, the Titanic sits crushed and corroding 2.5 miles down in freezing darkness, slowly disintegrating. So next time somebody brings up the Titanic, hit them with this one. Same builders, same blueprint, arguably a scarier disaster, and a far better ending. Two sister ships, one story everybody knows by heart, and one story that's been sitting quietly at the bottom of the sea for over 100 years, waiting for someone to actually tell it. If this is the kind of story you didn't know you needed today, subscribe because there's a lot more history hiding in plain sight, and I plan on digging up every last piece of it.